"She has sent it back, your grace," said Fetz, "and she says there is no answer." The Duke of Bramley looked at the small box lying on the salver. His mother's blue velvet, his own seal cracked and the ribbon retied by somebody in a very great hurry, and set down his coffee and said, "Then have my horse brought round." "It is snowing, your grace." "It has been snowing since Tuesday, Fetz. Have my horse brought round." It was the second day of Christmas. Bramley Chase was full of Holly and Lady Honoria Vesey, and 11 guests who had all been invited by his aunt without reference to him, and Corin Ashby had spent the morning being shown Miss Georgiana Prynne's watercolors of Italy, which she had not visited. He put the box in his coat and went out into the snow. The trouble had begun in October, at rent day, in the long room over the estate office at Nether Bramley, and Corin had brought it on himself in about 9 words. He had been in the chair for 4 hours with his agent Mr. Ruddle beside him, and 40 tenants coming and going. And at 2:30 a young woman in a much-mendied black pelisse had come to the table with a paper in her hand and asked, in a clear voice that carried the whole length of the room, whether his grace had received her letters. "Your name, madam?" "Aveline Shaw. I keep the school." "Then you will have written to Mr. Ruddle." "I have written to you, your grace, 9 times. The first was in April of last year." She laid the paper on the table in front of him, a fair copy, itemized, in a small round schoolmistress's hand. "The schoolhouse chimney has not drawn since the gale of 2 winters ago, and the smoke comes down into the room, and I cannot keep the fire in on a north wind, and I have 26 on the books, and 11 of them under 7 years old, and last February 2 of them were ill for a month. It is £11 to have the stack rebuilt. I have raised £4.12 in the village, and I am asking you for the remainder, and I have been asking for 20 months, and I am tired of being told to write to Mr. Ruddle, because Mr. Ruddle writes back that it is not on the estates list." The room had gone quiet in the way that rooms do when somebody is going to be sorry. And Corin Ashby, who had been 4 hours in that chair, and had a headache and a letter from his aunt in his pocket, had said the 9 words. "Madam, I have 300 buildings. Take your turn." He had thought about it a good deal since. Not the words themselves, they were true. He had 311 buildings, and a list that ran to 40 pages. But what had happened afterwards, which was that Miss Aveline Shaw had picked up her paper and folded it and said, "Then I shall write again in April, your grace, and every April, and in the meantime the children will be smoked like herrings, and I shall go on saying so in this room at every rent day, so you will know where to find me." And then she had curtsied, correctly and without the smallest insolence, and walked out past 40 of his tenants, and every man in that room had watched her go and then looked at the floor. She had cost him a fortnight's sleep, and he had not seen her again for 9 weeks. What he had done instead, and he was not proud of the sequence, was to send Ruddle to look into her. The report came in the 3rd week of December, and Corin read it in his library with the snow starting outside. Aveline Shaw, 24, daughter of the late Mr. Josiah Shaw, who had kept the Nether Bramley School for 31 years and had taught, among others, the present Duke's own father's grooms and half the parish, died of a pleurisy in the spring of the year before last. His widow living, 61, crippled with the rheumatism, in the 2 rooms behind the schoolroom. The daughter had taken the school at 19, and kept it since at a stipend of £22 a year paid by the parish, out of which she paid for coals, slates, and a girl to sit with her mother. In February that year, Mrs. Shaw's chest had been very bad, and the doctor from Marcham had come 4 times at 7 shillings and 6 pence. And in the same month, Ruddle wrote, Miss Shaw had sold her mother's wedding ring and a garnet cross to Loach the pawnbroker in Marcham for £1.15, and had been in 3 times since to ask whether they were still unsold, and had not been able to redeem them. Corin Ashby had sat with that piece of paper for a long time. £11. He had refused a woman £11 for a chimney in a room full of his own tenants, and gone home to a house where the 12 days of Christmas were about to cost him 300, and she had sold her mother's wedding ring for 35 shillings in February, and had gone back 3 times to look at it in a window. He sent to Marcham. Loach had them both still in the tray at the back. The ring was a thin, worn band of no value whatever to anybody on earth except one person, and the garnet cross was worth about 9 shillings, and Corin bought them for £4 because Loach saw a ducal servant coming and could not help himself. And then he sat down and wrote the letter that ruined his Christmas. He wrote 4 versions of it. The one he sent said this: "Madam, in this box are your mother's ring and the garnet cross, redeemed from Loach of Marcham, and they are not a gift, since they were never mine and never his. They are your property returned. The chimney is a separate matter, and is being seen to whether you speak to me again or not. The stack comes down in March and the estate pays, and I have written the order and Ruddle has it. And that is not a favor either. It is 20 months overdue. There is one thing I wish to ask of you, and it is a piece of impertinence, and you may refuse it without any consequence whatever to the school, your stipend, your mother, or your cottage. I give you my word on that, and you may hold this letter as the proof of it. My Aunt Lady Honoria Vesey has installed herself and 11 guests at the Chase for the 12 days, among them a Miss Prynne, and it is intended that an understanding shall be arrived at between Miss Prynne and myself before 12th night, and there is to be a ball on the Tuesday at which I am to be led to it like a horse to a farrier. I have refused in writing twice, and it has made no difference at all, because a refusal from me is not believed until there is something else in the field. I therefore ask you to let it be understood in this county, for 12 days, that the Duke of Bramley is courting Miss Aveline Shaw of Nether Bramley. Nothing else. No falsehood spoken by you to any person, no promise, no engagement, nothing whatever to be signed or announced. Only that you come to the Chase when you are asked, and stand up with me at the ball, and let them draw their own conclusions, which they will draw at a great pace and without help. In return I will endow the school. Not repair it, endow it. £500 in the funds, in trustees' names, the interest to the schoolmistress's stipend in perpetuity, the deed drawn so that no Duke of Bramley living or unborn can touch it. Your mother shall have the doctor from Marcham whenever she wants him, at the estate's charge, for the rest of her life. I am aware of exactly how this reads. Send me an answer of either kind. Bramley. He had sent it with the box on Christmas Eve. The box came back on the 26th, and there was no answer at all. The schoolhouse at Nether Bramley stood at the top of the village street with its back to the wind, and the smoke was coming down out of the chimney, and lying along the thatch in a way that told a man everything he needed to know about it. There was 6 inches of snow in the street, and more coming, and it was going dark at 4 o'clock. He tied his horse to the gate and knocked. She opened the door herself with a candle in her hand, and her face, when she saw him, went through 3 separate colors. Your Grace. Miss Shaw, you returned the ring. I did. You did not answer the question. No, said Aveline Shaw. Then I have come for an answer, said the Duke of Bramley, and I am not going away without one, and it is snowing, so you may as well let me stand inside the door as out of it. She let him stand inside the door. The schoolroom was long and low and smelled of smoke, and wet wool, with a stove at the far end, and 26 slates stacked on a shelf, and a great many strings of paper stars pinned along the beams, which stopped him more effectively than any argument she could have made. "The stars," he said. "It is Christmas," said Aveline Shaw. "They made them on the last day of term, your grace, if you have come to be thanked." "I have not." "Then you have come to be argued with, and I shall oblige you." She set the candle down on the master's desk with a small hard sound. "The ring I will not have. Not from you, not from anybody. Do you know what I should be in this village by Sunday if it were known that the Duke of Bramley had bought my mother's wedding ring out of a pawnshop in Marcham and sent it to me in a velvet box on Christmas Eve? There is one word for it, and every woman in this street knows the word. I have 26 children in this room, and I keep my place here on nothing in the world but character. That ring is the only thing I own that I cannot afford." "Then it is not the ring," said Corin slowly. "It is the box. It is all of it. And the school, £500 in the funds in trustees' names that I cannot touch." "That," said Aveline Shaw, "is the wickedest part of the whole letter, and I have been walking up and down this room for 2 days about it." Her voice was not steady now. "You know precisely what you have done. You have put a thing in front of me that is not for me. That is for Sam Pargetter's boys and the Kell girls and every child in this parish for the next 100 years, and you have made it the price of a lie. And I cannot say no to it, and I cannot say yes to it, and you knew that when you wrote it, your grace, or you are a great deal stupider than a man who has 311 buildings has any right to be." The Duke of Bramley stood among the paper stars with the snow melting off his shoulders, and understood that he had been thoroughly and correctly told. "Yes," he said, "I knew it. I wrote it at 2 in the morning, and I knew it when I sealed it, and I sent it anyway because I am used to getting what I want by putting a price on the table." He took the box out of his coat and set it on the master's desk, and then took his hand off it. "Miss Shaw, I withdraw the letter. All of it, both halves. The chimney is ordered, and it is not conditional on anything, and Ruddle has the order. You may go and read it tomorrow. The endowment I shall lay before the trustees in January, whatever answer you give me tonight. And if you like, I shall have my lawyer send the deed to the rector, so that it does not come from my hand at all. Then there is nothing left to ask me." "There is one thing left to ask you," said Corin, "and it is the true thing, and I have known it was the true thing since about the 4th of November." He found, to his considerable annoyance, that his mouth had gone dry. "I do not want a pretense. I never did. I dressed it up as one because a pretense can be refused without a man being humiliated, and I have never in my life asked a question I could be refused. What I want is to court you properly in the open, in front of my aunt and her 11 guests and this entire county, for the 12 days and after them. I want it understood because it is true, not because it is convenient." Aveline Shaw stood absolutely still. "Your Grace," she said at last, "you told me in October to take my turn." "I did. In front of 40 men who owe you their rent." "I did that too, and I have thought about it every week since, and there is no version of it that improves." He met her eyes. "I am not asking you to forget it. I am asking you to let me be looked at." The wind took the door in its frame. Somewhere at the back of the house, an old woman's voice called, thin and querulous, to ask who was there. "Terms," said Aveline Shaw. "Name them." "I will come to the chase when I am asked, and I will stand up with you at the ball, and I will not tell one lie to one person for 12 days. If I am asked whether we are engaged, I shall say no, and if I am asked whether you are courting me, I shall say yes, and you must bear both answers." She had begun to count on her fingers, and her hands were shaking, and she went on counting anyway. The endowment goes to the trustees in January whether you are sick of me by then or not, and if you withdraw from it, I shall stand up in this village and say what you did. My mother is not to be visited by your aunt. I will not accept clothes, or a carriage, or jewelry, or money. I will walk up your avenue in the boots I have got." "Agreed to all of it," said the Duke of Bramley. "And the ring?" Aveline Shaw looked at the little blue velvet box on the master's desk for a long moment. "The ring stays there," she said, "on that desk in this room in front of 26 slates and the paper stars, until such time as there is nobody left in England who could put the wrong word to it. And then, your grace, I shall put it on my mother's hand myself, and you may watch me do it, and not before." Corin Ashby bowed to a village schoolmistress in a mendied black pelisse, as he had never bowed to anybody in his life. "Twelfth Night is the Tuesday," he said. "May I come on Friday?" "You may come on Friday," said Aveline Shaw. "And your grace had better bring a hat that will not blow off, because there is nothing between this door and Bramley Chase but 3 miles of open field." He came on the Friday, and by Saturday noon there was not a soul within 9 miles who did not know it. She came on the Sunday, to dinner, in her own boots, having walked 3 miles in a hard frost with the hem of her one good gray gown pinned up out of the snow. And she unpinned it in the hall and shook it out and gave her cloak to Fetz, as though she had been doing it all her life. They tried her for 4 hours. Corin sat and watched them do it, and did not intervene except twice, and both times she got there before him. Lady Honoria asked her, over the fish, whether her father had been in trade. "He was a schoolmaster for 31 years, ma'am, and his father was a wheelwright at Marcham, and the wheels are still going round in that parish, which is more than most of us will manage." A Mr. Fanshawe, who had drunk a good deal, asked her what she thought she should do at Bramley Chase all day if she were mistress of it, since there was no school here. And Aveline Shaw put down her fork and said, "There are 240 children on this estate, sir, and one school with a chimney that does not draw, and the nearest other is at Marcham, 7 miles, which no child of 6 can walk in January. I should think there was a good deal to do." The table went quiet. Corin looked down at his plate to hide his face, and was not entirely successful. Later, when the ladies had gone through, and his aunt had got Miss Prynne to the pianoforte, he found Aveline standing in front of the portrait of his mother in the small drawing-room, quite alone, with her hands behind her back. "They have been very civil," she said, without turning. "They have been abominable. No, genuinely civil, most of them. Your aunt believes every word she has said tonight, and she is not enjoying herself. She thinks she is saving you from a great mistake, and she is going to lose, and she knows it, and I am sorry for her." Aveline tipped her head at the portrait. She had a kind mouth. "She taught in that school," said Corin. Aveline turned round. "For 2 winters, when I was 9 and 10, Wednesday afternoons, the reading. My father did not like it, and she did it anyway." He put his hands in his pockets. "Your father was the master then. He used to send her home in the gig because she would try to walk." "You never said." "I had forgotten it," said the Duke of Bramley, "until the 4th of November, when I was riding past the schoolhouse, and the door was open, and I heard you take 26 children through the 7 times table, and I remembered the smell of that room, and I sat in the lane on a horse for a quarter of an hour like a fool, and that is the whole truth of when this began. They skated on the mere on the Monday, because the frost held and half the village came out onto it, with a bonfire on the bank and chestnuts in the ashes. He had not skated in 11 years. She had not skated at all, and Corin Ashby, Duke of Bramley, spent 2 hours going backwards very slowly across a frozen mere, holding both hands of a woman who told him at intervals, through her teeth, that this was the most ridiculous thing anybody had ever done in the history of the parish. When she went down, she took him with her, and they sat on the ice laughing while the Kell boys shrieked round them in circles, and she had snow in her hair, and her nose was scarlet. And Corin looked at her, and understood, with the tidy finality of a bolt going home, that there was not going to be anybody else ever, and that he had better say so before he lost his nerve. He did not say so. He said, "Chestnut." The storm came in on the Wednesday night, the 2nd of January, and the worst wind on that coast for 9 years. And it took the roof off 2 cottages at the Kell end of the village, and put the schoolhouse chimney stacked down through its own thatch at about 4 in the morning. Corin got there at 6:30 with 14 men, 3 wagons, and every tarpaulin and hurdle on the estate, having been woken by his own head groom, and having not troubled to put on a cravat. Aveline Shaw was on the schoolroom floor in a shawl and her father's old coat, in a foot of snow that had come in through the hole in the roof, moving slates. "Your mother," said Corin, in the Pargetter's back room, warm, cross, and telling them how to make tea. She straightened, and there was brick dust across her cheek and her hands were bleeding at the knuckles. "The stack came down inward. It has gone through the roof and the beam is cracked, but it held, and it fell on the master's desk and not on the benches, and if it had happened in term time at 11 in the morning, her voice stopped working." She turned away and put the back of her wrist against her eyes and said, in a completely different voice, 20 months, Your Grace." "Yes," said Corin Ashby, 20 months. He did not offer her anything, and he did not apologize, because there was nothing to be said that had not been said in October in front of 40 men. He took off his coat and put it round her shoulders, and then he went up on the roof himself with the tarpaulins. They worked that day until it went dark. 14 men, the rector, both the Kell brothers, 4 of the mothers, and a duke. By nightfall the schoolhouse had a sound tarpaulin over the whole. The 2 cottages were watertight. The Kell family was in the estate's own laundry with a stove, and Corin had a gash across the back of his hand from a broken slate that Aveline Shaw bound up with a strip off her petticoat in front of everybody, saying that it was the most sensible use that garment had had in 4 years. That evening he sat in the 2 rooms behind the schoolroom, on a hard chair, and was examined by Mrs. Shaw. She was 61 and bent nearly double with the rheumatism, and she had a face like a hatchet and no fear of anything living. "You are the Duke." "I am, ma'am." "You told my girl to take her turn." "I did." "In front of the whole parish." "In front of 40 tenants. It was worse than the parish. The parish only heard it afterwards." Mrs. Shaw looked at him for a long time out of pale eyes. "And now you come here of an evening and go up on my roof in a gale," she said. "Well, there is many a man would have sent the 14 and stopped at home. What do you want with her, then? Say it out. I have not the breath for hinting." "I want to marry her," said the Duke of Bramley. "She will not have you," said Mrs. Shaw. "She has been holding this house up since her father died, and a woman who has been doing that for 2 years does not know how to put a thing down. You will have to take it out of her hands 1 finger at a time." The old woman sniffed. "There is a box on that desk in there. Blue velvet." "Yes." "Has told me what is in it, and she has not opened it, and she will not, and I have not asked her to." A pause. 39 years I wore that ring, and she got £1.15 for it and the cross, and she came home and told me she had put it away safe for cleaning, and she has told me that lie about 11 times, and I have let her, because it is the only lie the girl has ever told in her life, and she is so bad at it." The pale eyes came up. "Do not you dare give it to me. She is to do it." "You mind that?" "I have promised her exactly that," said Corin, "and I intend to be in the room." He came away from the schoolhouse at 9 o'clock and walked the 3 miles back to the chase in the snow, having sent the horse home with a groom hours before, and it was the happiest walk of his life. On the Monday, 12th night eve, Aveline Shaw came to the door of the estate office at Nether Bramley while he was going through the timber accounts with Ruddle, and stood there until Ruddle took the hint and left. "The letter is gone," she said. Corin put down his pen. "Your letter, the one you sent with the box on Christmas Eve." She was very pale. "I kept it. You told me I might hold it as my proof that the school and my place and my mother did not depend on any answer I gave you, and I did hold it because it was the only paper in the world that protected me, and I put it in the master's desk in the schoolroom in the long drawer, which locks. And the drawer has been opened. The lock has been picked or forced with something thin. The wood is scored. It was sound on Saturday morning, and it was open this morning." She swallowed. "And on Saturday afternoon there was a woman at my back door asking for me and telling Mrs. Pargeter she was from the chase, a thin, dark woman in a good gray cloak with a Bramley crest on the buttons, who did not leave her name and did not wait." "Hobie," said Corin, "my aunt's woman." "I do not accuse anybody. I am telling you what the drawer looks like." He stood up and went to the window and looked out at the white street and did the arithmetic, and found that it came out very simply indeed. Every word of that letter was in his own hand, over his own signature. The aunt, the 11 guests, the request that it be understood for 12 days that the Duke of Bramley was courting Miss Aveline Shaw of Nether Bramley, and the £500 in the funds offered in return. Read out to a ballroom. It said one thing and one thing only: that the schoolmistress of Nether Bramley had sold 12 days of her reputation to a duke for £500 and a chimney, and that the courtship the whole county had been watching for a fortnight was a hired arrangement. "They will not do it tomorrow," he said. "They cannot. My aunt would never." "Your aunt would never," said Aveline Shaw. "Your aunt has spent a fortnight losing a fight she thinks she is fighting for your sake, and she is a proud woman, and she is not cruel, and she will not do it. Miss Prynne is 19, your grace, and she has been brought 200 miles in December and paraded for 12 days and made ridiculous in front of 11 guests by a woman in boots, and tomorrow is the last night, and she has nothing at all to lose." She drew a breath. "So it will be read out tomorrow in front of 200 people, and it will be read in your own handwriting, and every word in it will be true." The clock on the estate office wall ticked. "Then do not come," said Corin. "That is the one thing I cannot do," said Aveline Shaw, "because if I do not come, it is answered for me. Send the carriage at 7, your grace. I shall walk down to the gate and get into it there, so that they may say I was fetched." Bramley Chase on 12th night held 206 people, 1,100 candles, and a Yule log in the great hall that 4 men had brought in on a hurdle. Aveline Shaw came in at 7:30 in the grey gown, with her mother's garnet cross at her throat. Corin saw it from across the hall and understood, and had to stand still for a moment. "The cross," he said when he reached her. "It was 9 shillings, and I have paid you 9 shillings. Mr. Ruddle has it in an envelope and is instructed to bank it. The ring is a different matter, and it stays where it is." She looked up at him. Her chin was level and her hands were like ice. "Is it here?" "Yes." "Where?" "In Miss Prynne's reticule," said the Duke of Bramley. and it has been there since Saturday evening, and my aunt does not know." They danced twice, and stood up for the country dance with the Kells and the Pargeters and half the village, because the 12th night ball at Bramley Chase had been open to the tenants, since his grandfather's day, and Corin had made very certain that nobody forgot it that year. And at 11:15, in the lull after supper, when the musicians had gone out for their beer, and 200 people were standing about in the long gallery with the candles guttering, Miss Georgiana Prynne stepped up onto the second stair of the great staircase, and clapped her hands twice, and said in a high, clear voice that she had something for the company's amusement. "A reading," she said, "a letter. It came into my hands quite by chance, and I am sure Miss Shaw will not object, for I hear she is a great one for plain speaking." Lady Honoria Vesey said, "Georgiana." Miss Prynne unfolded the paper and began. She read it well. She read the first 2 paragraphs and the third, and got as far as, "I therefore ask you to let it be understood in this county, for 12 days, that the Duke of Bramley is courting Miss Aveline Shaw of Nether Bramley. And then, in return I will endow the school, £500 in the funds." And the sound that went round that gallery was the sound Corin had been listening for since Monday afternoon. He had had 31 hours to decide what to do when it came, and he did not move to stop her. "Read the rest," said Aveline Shaw. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Miss Prynne's eyes went down the page and stopped. "Read the rest, madam," said Aveline. "You have read the offer. There are 4 lines under it, and they are the only ones that matter. If you will not read them, hand it to somebody who will." "I—" The Duke of Bramley went up the stairs and took the letter out of her hand, quite gently, and turned round, and read it out himself from the beginning, in the voice he had used for 40 tenants in the long room in October. Every word, the redeemed ring, the chimney, the 20 months overdue, the aunt, the 11 guests, the horse and the farrier, the £500, and then the 4 lines at the end. "You may refuse it without any consequence whatever to the school, your stipend, your mother, or your cottage. I give you my word on that, and you may hold this letter as the proof of it." He lowered the paper. "That is my hand and my seal, and every word of it is true," said Corin Ashby. "And it is the most shameful thing I have ever written, and I want the whole of this county to have heard it, because there is not one word of it that Miss Shaw need be ashamed of, and there is not one word of it that does not shame me. I wrote that letter at 2 in the morning on the 23rd of December, and I dressed a real feeling up as a bargain, because a bargain can be refused without a man's pride being touched, and I have never in my life risked being refused. She sent the box back on the 26th with no answer at all. I rode down to Nether Bramley in the snow that same afternoon, and stood in the schoolroom under the paper, stars her scholars had made, and she told me to my face what that letter was, in language I shall not forget, and I withdrew every clause of it on the spot in front of her mother's fire. There has been no bargain since the 26th of December. There has been no pretense at any hour of these 12 days. Every soul in this room has been watching a man court a woman in earnest and be very slow about it. And if any of you doubt it, you may ask the 14 men who were on the schoolhouse roof with me on Thursday, or ask Mrs. Shaw, who told me on Thursday night that her daughter would never have me. The endowment goes before the trustees on the 15th of this month. It went to my lawyer on the 27th of December. Mr. Dabney has had the draft deed in his hands for a fortnight, and will show it to anybody who asks. And it is drawn so that no Duke of Bramley living or unborn can touch it, and it does not depend on Miss Shaw marrying me, or speaking to me, or being in the same county as me. If she never gives me another civil word, The school at Nether Bramley is endowed forever, and the two I intend to build at Marcham Fen and Kell Green will be built, because there are 240 children on this estate, and one schoolroom with a stack that came down through its own thatch on Thursday morning at 4 o'clock. If it had come down at 11 in term time, I should be attending funerals this week instead of giving a ball, and I should have deserved to. Nobody in the gallery moved. "One more thing, and then the musicians may come back," said the Duke of Bramley. "That letter was in a locked drawer in the master's desk in the schoolhouse on Saturday morning. The lock has been forced with something thin, and the wood is scored. Fets." "Your Grace, is Hobie in the house?" There was a pause, and then a rustling movement at the back of the crowd, and Lady Honoria Vesey said, in a voice Corin had never heard from her, "She is in my dressing room, and she has been packing since 9 o'clock, because she confessed the whole of it to me at 8, and I have dismissed her without a character." His aunt came forward to the foot of the stairs. She had gone the color of ash, and she stood extremely straight. "She was sent to Nether Bramley on Saturday afternoon with my cloak on her back and my crest on her buttons, and she was not sent by me. I have known since 8 o'clock this evening who sent her, and I have spent 3 hours telling myself that the thing would not be done tonight, because I could not bear to be the woman who had brought her into this house." She turned and looked up at the second stair, where Miss Georgiana Prynne stood alone. "You had the letter read from my staircase in front of my brother's portrait. Your trunk will be in the hall at 7, and the carriage will take you to Marcham for the mail coach, and I shall write to your mother tonight and tell her precisely why." And then Lady Honoria Vesey did the thing that Corin never afterwards heard her explain to anybody. She crossed the gallery to Aveline Shaw in front of 206 people and said, quite loudly, "Miss Shaw, I have been abominable to you for a fortnight in my own dining room with intention. You have answered me every time without once being rude, which I found extremely provoking. I was wrong about you within about 4 days, and I went on because I had begun." She held out her arm. "You will take my arm through this room now, if you please, because I am the only person here who can make the county certain, and I find I want to." Aveline Shaw took her arm. They went the length of the long gallery together, and somewhere near the middle of it, the Kell brothers began to cheer. And after that, it was not a ball anybody could go on giving a reading at. At 1 in the morning, Corin found her in the small drawing-room in front of his mother's portrait, exactly where she had stood on the first Sunday, with her hands behind her back. "Aveline Shaw," said the Duke of Bramley, "marry me." "Not here," she said. He had been braced for a great many answers. That was not among them. "Not in this house with 200 people in it, and your aunt on my arm and that girl crying upstairs in a bedroom," said Aveline, turning round, and her eyes were bright, and her voice was not steady at all. "Not tonight after all that, when I could not tell for the rest of my life whether I said yes to you or to the room. You came to my door on the 26th of December in the snow and demanded an answer, your Grace, and you did not get one, and I have owed you one ever since." She lifted her chin. "Come to my door and demand it again, tomorrow. It is where the question was properly asked, and it is where it will be properly answered, and there will be nobody in the room but my mother and 26 slates and the paper stars." He came at 11 the next morning on foot, through fresh snow, in the plainest coat he owned. He knocked. She opened the door herself with her sleeves pushed up and flour on her hands, because it was baking day, and she had refused on principle to make it anything else. "Miss Shaw," said the Duke of Bramley, "I have come for an answer." "Then you had better come in out of it," said Aveline Shaw, "and mind the beam where the stack came through." She wiped her hands on her apron, and looked at him for a moment in the smoky gray light of that long, low room, under the paper stars. "Yes," she said. The banns were called at Nether Bramley on the 3 Sundays following, and on the 3rd Sunday, in the afternoon, the schoolroom was full. 26 scholars on the benches in their Sunday things, Mrs. Shaw in the master's own chair by the stove with a rug over her knees, the Pargetters, the Kells, the rector, and a duke standing at the back of the room by the door with his hat in his hands like any other man who had come in late. Aveline Shaw took the little blue velvet box off the master's desk, where it had sat since the 26th of December, and opened it for the first time. She knelt down in front of her mother's chair, and took the old woman's crooked left hand, and put a thin worn band that had been sold for £1 15 in February back, where it had been for 39 years, and closed her mother's fingers over it, and could not say anything at all. Mrs. Shaw said, "Well," in a voice like a gate, and then, "Well," again, and then nothing. And 26 children, who had not been told what they were watching and had worked it out anyway, made a noise that went out through the hole in the thatch and was heard. The Kell boys always swore, at the lodge gates of Bramley Chase. They were married at Candlemas, in the parish church at Nether Bramley, with snow on the churchyard wall and the whole village in the pews and Lady Honoria Vesey in the second one, weeping into a handkerchief and denying it. The endowment had gone before the trustees on the 15th of January and been settled at £700 rather than 5, because the Duke had lost an argument with his own lawyer about the price of coals. The stack came down properly in March and was rebuilt with a new beam and a slate roof, and the schoolhouse at Nether Bramley never smoked again. The school at Kell Green opened the following spring, and the one at Marcham Fen the year after, and the Duchess of Bramley walked or rode to one or another of them 4 days in 7 for 30 years and beat time with a ruler at every harvest hymn. Mrs. Shaw came to the Chase and would not have the east rooms, and took 2 small ones over the kitchen garden instead, on the grounds that she liked to see people going in and out, and she wore her ring for 11 more years, and died in her chair in the sun with it on. Every January the mere froze, and every January the Duke of Bramley went backwards very slowly across it, holding both hands of his wife, who never learned to skate and never once admitted it. And every January half the parish came out to watch and eat chestnuts on the bank and pretend they had come for the ice. And the little blue velvet box stayed on the master's desk in the schoolroom at Nether Bramley, empty, with the lid up, for as long as either of them lived, because the Duchess would not have it moved, and because when the new mistress asked, the first week, what it was for, Aveline Shaw told her the truth. "It is to remind me," she said, "that I was proud enough to send it back, and that he was fool enough to come and ask me why in the snow at 4 o'clock with no hat."